Something I find really funny about the trumpet community at large is just how reviled the Bach 7C is. For reference, almost everybody starts playing the trumpet on something either labeled 7C or modeled after a 7C. And just the mere mention of a 7C inspires dread and strife and misery and agony in the hearts of trumpet players everywhere. There are so many forum posts dedicated to, I've been playing on a 7C for such and such amount of time, and there's got to be something that's better for my high notes, better for my sound, right? Like, what mouthpiece can I switch onto that'll make all these things better? And truth be told, I think the grievances surrounding mouthpieces like the Bach 7C are, at the very least, vastly overblown or perhaps misidentified. Although if we want to get into what that means, we're going to be here for an additional 15 minutes on top of however long this video has already turned out, so we'll save that can of worms for another video. In this video, instead, I want to tackle an alternative available in the Bach line, but also available in the Blessing lineup, which is even a little bit cheaper, that I think is really good both for the starting student, if they're a slightly bigger frame, or even the advanced player. This is a mouthpiece I've used on gigs and had great success with. Let's talk about it. How's it going, everybody? You're tuned into the Samuel Plays Brass channel with your host, Sam, as per usual. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you're all doing well. This is a first for Scholastic Brass Special, and we're finally getting around to it in its third season, but reviewing a mouthpiece under the guise of the Scholastic umbrella seems a little odd, considering we've only talked about instruments or done the occasional instructional topic up to this point, but I think this is not only a great mouthpiece for all ages, but is very much, like I said, a viable alternative to the Bach 7C. Today we are talking about the Blessing 5B, a very, very affordable starter or advanced mouthpiece that has some really interesting tonal capabilities to it. Now I want to take a minute here to go on a quick little tangent before we proceed. Over the past couple of years, I have managed to accrue 5 different 5B mouthpieces, specifically Bach 5Bs. And I know we're talking about the Blessing in this video, but Blessing's designs are all modeled after Bach designs. And with 5 Bach 5Bs under my roof, I figure I could probably realistically get rid of 4 of them and nothing of value would be lost in my life, as much as I do love the 5B. So if you go down to the video description, you'll find links to my eBay and my Reverb shops, where you can check those listings out, find the one that feels most appropriate to you if you're looking for one, and there you go. Now you can have your very own 5B. They're all fairly cheap since they're used to varying extents, but feel free to check those out if you're interested. Anyhow, let's get on with our usual programming. To introduce to you the Blessing 5B, I would like to read you a blurb from the website of Alamo Music, based in Texas. They are not in any way sponsoring this video, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they have a nice little blurb about the 5B that I think sets it up really nicely. The 5B provides qualities of a bigger diameter mouthpiece in a smaller, more manageable rim diameter. The slightly deeper cup offers a warm, rich tone. There are educators, particularly in Texas, that prefer to start students on this size because it quickly helps a student achieve depth and resonance in the sound. I think that is very true. It sums up my thoughts very nicely from all of the Blessing and Bach 5Bs that I've tried, where yes, it is friendly enough for 3C and 1.5 players to play on, and you get that really nice, deeper sound on something of a slightly smaller diameter, and moreover, if a student's got particularly fleshy lips or they're older than, let's say, the age of 10 or 11 starting out, I do think it makes for a very good beginner size in encouraging a student to produce a certain type of warmth in their tone. We'll go over some technical specifications as well. The cup depth is listed as medium deep, whereas a 5A would be considered deep and a 5C would be considered medium. The diameter is listed, and this is a little contentious, at 16.25 millimeters, which would be 0.64? Yes, 0.64 of an inch. That I don't think is quite right. I think it's just a little bit undersized. I think a lot of 5Bs, particularly in Bach's lineup where they can be a little bit more inconsistent based on the manufacturing era, a lot of them end up more at like 16.5 millimeters or something like 0.65 of an inch instead. The rim shape is listed as medium wide, which I would say is relatively true of the Blessing. I think it's got a nice amount of comfort to the rim. What you might notice about some modern Bach 5B mouthpieces is that the rim is actually a little bit on the narrower side and it's a lot more rounded. And that is part of what makes it friendly to me as a 1.5 type player, is I like a rim that's narrower and more rounded or even a little bit sharper, because that's what I'm used to from Bach 1.5 rims. Now, I don't want to open too many cans of worms here, especially considering I have a more focused and less perhaps surface level scholastic discussion of the Bach 5B that'll come out at a separate time and will feature all of those 5 aforementioned Bach 5B subjects. But what I will say is the Blessing 5B is a fairly faithful recreation of its Bach equivalent, particularly a slightly older 5B, like a Corporation era 5B. Now, Mount Vernon and Corporation-era Bachs are held in fairly high regard, and it seems that Blessing figured that they would take from the most reputable of Bach's designs and recreate them in a modern setting. What I will say about the modern Bach 5B is that's the one that will feel like a little bit more familiar territory to the 1.5C type player, because it has that sort of rounder or slightly sharper rim contour that actually makes the inner diameter feel maybe a little bit wider than it actually is. I'll actually put up a screenshot here, although I'm sure it'll be discussed in more depth in the other video, of a trumpet mouthpiece comparator showing scans of a Bach New York period 5B, a very early one, and a modern Bach 5B. The modern one has that narrower rim contour that actually makes the inner diameter feel a little bit wider, as you'll notice. The Blessing 5B having that slightly flatter and wider rim I think is helpful, especially for 3C and 7C type players in terms of bridging the gap between different rim types. You don't want to too drastically change your rim contour when you change mouthpieces if you can help it. Now, the biggest things I can say to the Blessing 5B's credit are as follows. Firstly, it really excels in the softer dynamics of trumpet playing. It practically lets me play quieter for free. But not only that, not only are you able to really reel in the volume much more effectively than on a C cup, but the sound that you get when you approach it right is just incredible. It's got this whispery, subtone, ballad-like sort of sound, more so, of course, than a 5C, or any C cup really, but even, surprisingly more so, than Bach A cups. I generally play on a Bach 1.5A, which is a one-off mouthpiece. It doesn't formally exist in the Bach catalog, but I've also tried your typical 5A, 7A, 9A, those type of mouthpieces. And while the A cup does provide sort of the thickest, darkest sound in Bach's standard A through F lineup, it doesn't have quite as much of that smokiness. It's more of a sort of a straight-ahead, thick, dark sound. Now, if approached efficiently, given the fact that it's not that much deeper than a 5C, the 5B of course will still light up in a trumpet-like fashion and allow you to access the full dynamic and pitch spectrum, as you would hope any well-balanced mouthpiece could. And moreover, a 5B will blend with a section of C-cup mouthpieces if you push it the right way, but it really does expand your versatility as a player, in my opinion, and that is almost always a good thing as a trumpet player. Particularly for its fairly light price tag, I think the Blessing 5B is very much a worthy investment for many trumpet players out there, and as such, today it will be taking home a nice, sizable SAM seal of approval. I think it's a great mouthpiece for beginners in terms of promoting a richer and broader tone from them right from the get-go. In fact, this very Blessing 5B that you heard in this video is now in the hands of one of my beginner students who sounded great with it straight from the jump. I think it really does produce a nicer sound than almost every 7C out there. I know there are some that trend deeper, but generally not quite as deep as the 5B is. But nonetheless, I wouldn't pigeonhole this by any means as a beginner mouthpiece. I think it is very much viable at any level of playing if you have the proper set of chops for it, of course, since this is all very individualized. I think overall the 5B is a nice sort of bridge, a friendly all-around sort of size for anyone really looking to fluff up their tone, get into ballad playing, get into cornet playing. You know, it's a good starter mouthpiece for the cornet. I think there are really a lot of uses for it. Those are the situations in which I've used it. I've used it where I was desiring a cornet sound, and I've used it in a jazz combo setting where I was doing some fairly dexterous solo improv work. Those were the two areas in which I found it to be the strongest, although I do know plenty of players who use the 5B for their all-around playing. And with that, we will put a bow on this episode of the Scholastic Brass Special Season 3. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got a couple more mouthpiece reviews coming out this month that will hopefully sort of tie into the same theme as far as great value, whether for the younger or older student, and something that makes for a good investment in your future as a musician. But nonetheless, until next time, I hope you'll stay tuned, and we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support the creation of bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, have your name featured right here, and a whole host of other perks and benefits, then please consider pledging your support at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. For now, you can find more videos in the end screen cards to my left.